Episode 1 of Fallout begins with news of nuclear war on the horizon. We're in a revised version of the US in 2077, and a few stragglers at a party stand around the TV and listen to what's being reported. The president has gone missing, and there could be nukes being dropped imminently. The birthday party continues despite this, but there are some lovely nods to the games, including some adverts on the TV. The main character for now is Cooper Howard, who entertains the kids with his lassoing. When they step inside, Cooper and the others watch in horror as a nuke is detonated and the world as we know it is brought to an end. With the nuke going off, everyone scrambles to the nearby vault. It's touch and go for a while, and although some manage to scramble down below, others try to hightail it out of there in their cars. As for Cooper, he goes off on horseback, but it seems futile given there are numerous nuclear explosions.
He's dead.
We then cut to 219 years later, where we're introduced to Lucy McLean. She can do it all, with decent skills and everything, except gunplay, which she's not too great at. She lives in Vault 33, far below the surface, and she speaks to the council and asks them for permission to participate in the triennial trade with Vault 32. All 3 members say yes. With Lucy preparing to meet her future husband, she stands with the others by the entrance to Vault 32. Her cousin, Chet, is none too happy about her going, but she reminds him that sexual relations between family members isn't something they should continue.
Alabama!
When the vault doors open, we're introduced to Lee Moldova, the apparent overseer of Vault 32. Lucy's groom is a guy called Monty, who's not too shabby, but Lucy, by comparison, is socially awkward and immediately asks about his sperm count at dinner.
Oh no! No!
They're interrupted by the authorities though, who believe that the surface will now be sustainable for Monty and Lucy's children, who will be able to start repopulating the planet on the surface. They do warn that they don't know what's up there, and having played the game, I'm guessing a ton of glitches.
I like what I see.
Anyway, the wedding ends and it's down to business for Lucy and Monty. However, unbeknownst to them, and a lot of the guys and girls in Vault 33, the conditions in the adjacent vault are apocalyptic, for want of a better word. Their wheat is ravaged, their stockpiles depleted, and the whole place is a ransacked mess. Lucy's brother, Norman, actually goes in exploring, where he finds a previous overseer has been murdered. Lucy suspects something is afoul when she hears screaming inside, and it's here she realises the horrible mistake that their vault has made. These guys are raiders and have infiltrated their home. Monty and Lucy fight, but when the alarm begins screaming, Lucy takes the opportunity to knock Monty out, but not before suffering a nasty gash to her side. Still in her wedding dress, Lucy heads out, clutching her side, and manages to hold her own and kill the raiders nearby. Unfortunately, the raiders overcome the vault folk, and then it comes down to a standoff. Moldova decides to offer Hank and the others a choice. She'll either spare Lucy or a bunch of people from within the vault. It's not even a choice. Hank locks his daughter in a closet and sacrifices himself. He's tranquilized and taken out to the real world. Meanwhile, the survivors of the vault gather for an emergency assembly. Lucy wants to set up a search party to try and find her dad. The others refuse, so it falls to Norman to help open the door and let his sister out. When Lucy emerges into this new world, she looks out and is shocked by what she sees. The world is full of corpses, bones litter the floor, and the place is a complete wasteland. However, they are right by the coastline too, and the remnants of a pier, so it's at least a beautiful wasteland. We then cut to another new character, Maximus.
Are you not entertained?
No, not that one. He's above the surface and happens to be within the Brotherhood of Steel. He's part of the ranks for a faction that wants to try and bring a semblance of order and prosperity back to the world. The teacher, Felix, is none too happy with Max's lack of knowledge in the subject and promptly smacks him in the mouth when he speaks up. Maximus is kept on the fringes of this world, and to make matters worse, his one friend, Dane, is actually promoted to head out into the wilds with his comrades. This is a bitter pill for Max to swallow, given his fellow Steel recruits bully him and essentially treat him like dirt. Max is not happy, but in the morning, Dane comes off the worst for wear. Someone has dropped razor blades inside her boot, sabotaging her chance of making it out. Unfortunately, the authorities believe that Maximus is the one responsible for this. They take him away and question him over the injury. Maximus admits that he did want this to happen, but he didn't actually do this. Maximus admits he doesn't want to be weak and wants to be one of them. When he's ready to give up his life to the Brotherhood and willing to do everything for them, he gets an unexpected promotion. In fact, he gets Dane's position as a squire. Maximus heads off to see Dane, and she admits that she actually told them that Max wouldn't hurt a fly. As they exchange a look to one another, a wave of guilt clearly passes over Maximus's face. Anyway, after this, Maximus is initiated into the Brotherhood properly. They're all told of their next mission, which includes a wanted target. With the knight armor for them to wear, Maximus learns that a denizen of the Enclave has escaped. This guy has an object of profound potential to harm their nation, so they need to stop him no matter what. We'll learn more about this in the episodes ahead.
Spoilers!
News of this reaches others in the wilderness too, including a bunch of bandits. Slim and Honcho approach a reclusive ghoul who happens to be none other than Cooper. Remember him? The guy from the start of the show? Well, he's a prolific sharpshooter in these parts, and he's simply called the Ghoul. He kills the raiders without much aplomb and takes off, and that is where episode 1 comes to an end. Episode 2 of Fallout begins with a look at another new character over at the Enclave, Wilzig. Hey, it's Ben from Lost.
History is about to repeat itself.
Anyway, he's just as nefarious here too, given he's working as part of an elite set of scientists. They're breeding the best in class dogs. If newborns weigh under a certain weight, they're killed, or incinerated, while the end goal here seems to be creating some sort of serum. All will be revealed later in the show though.
Spoilers. What?
But for now, Wilzig injects himself with something and this tiny pill is wedged in his neck. CX-404 is the name of his perfect dog, the one Wilzig has raised since they were a newborn, and he protects his master by killing another scientist who shows up and hits the alarm when he notices what Wilzig has done. Before anyone else can get alerted to his arrival, Wilzig takes CX-404 and heads out into the wilderness. This is our target, the one the Brotherhood and also the Ghoul are after, and it explains his origin. Meanwhile, Lucy continues her crusade to try and find her dad. As she camps out that night under the stars, her lit fire attracts the attention of none other than Wilzig. He warns that this is a recipe for her to die and she needs to adjust to this world. She needs to adapt, and he warns that her priorities may change when she becomes a different animal altogether. He soon disappears, and Lucy continues to keep her fire lit despite the warnings. Thankfully, nothing comes near her. Wilzig heads out with CX-404, but they happen to be near radioactive waste. His dog brings back a severed hand, and the bones nearby alert to a much more menacing creature in the vicinity. This happens to coincide with Maximus, who finds himself following along with the knight, Titus, he's assigned with. They arrive right at the mouth of a cave and, armed with a large gun, head in together. Titus hangs back and demands Maximus look deeper in the cave to find the adversary. In doing so, it actually shows up behind the Brotherhood knight, who runs out the cave and allows himself to be mauled by this huge mutant bear.
Justice.
Titus belittles Maximus constantly after he hits a killer blow on the creature, to the point where Maximus decides that he doesn't deserve the armor. He's going to let the guy bleed out and die, deciding to take the armor for himself and bring back the target, that being Wilzig, to prove his honor too.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
In the morning, Lucy shows up at an abandoned house, wanting to ask for directions. The guy there is rather eccentric and he points out that Philly, the nearby city, is just over the hill, but it's incredibly dangerous. When he mentions he hasn't seen her father either, the guy basically asks to be one himself to Lucy's children.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen, mate.
He tries to sell the rundown house and a possible life to her, but Lucy graciously declines the offer. Lucy ends up in the same woods as Maximus and follows a crowd of people as she stumbles upon Philly. Whilst there, she attracts the attention of the Ghoul, who happens to be watching from afar. Lucy shows up at the nearby shop and asks about Moldava. As soon as she does, the demeanor changes. She warns Lucy that she needs to leave, otherwise things are going to get worse for her. When Lucy leaves the shop, she ends up running into Wilzig again. He brings up her entire history and warns that the world is very different up here compared to in the vaults. Their little encounter brings the attention of the Ghoul though, who decides he's going to make himself welcome. He points to Wilzig and the bounty on his head. Marjune, the owner of the shop, has apparently been paid a ton of caps, which is the Fallout equivalent of money, to give him safe passage to Philly. The Ghoul doesn't wait for a reply and instead shoots off Wilzig's foot. With 1,000 bottle caps over the Ghoul's head, a big fight breaks out in town. Here we see the sheer power and skill that Cooper commands. While all this is going on, Lucy heads inside the shop and checks out June's log, where she notices Moldava's name. As she's searching through, she notices a gun up on the wall and decides to take it for herself. As she steps outside, face to face with the Ghoul, she tries to fight him. However, the big turning point here comes from Maximus, who shows just in time with his armor and protects Lucy from the killer blow. He keeps the Ghoul busy as they fight in the main square, while June and Lucy work together to bring Wilzig inside. Marjune brings her associate, Barv, in to fix Wilzig's leg. It seems to do the trick and he ends up with a metal prosthetic limb, while Maximus loses control of his suit and finds himself nowhere near the level he should be to fight off the Ghoul. I guess he'll just have to level up with some side quests then.
That's not funny!
Anyway, the Ghoul fixes up CX-404 after initially knifing the dog. He uses a stim pack to heal him up. However, he does so in a bid to find Wilzig, using the dog's superior sense of smell to guide him in the right direction. When we cut to Lucy and Wilzig, they happen to be way off in the wilderness and seem to have made good time given where they were before. Surely they must have fast travelled, right?
It's not funny. It's not funny. I am fucking pissed off.
Anyway, Wilzig decides to give up and drinks the serum to kill himself. He tells Lucy, before he dies, to bring his head to Moldava and change the future. Episode 3 of Fallout begins right back at the beginning with a look at Cooper. This is pre-nuclear war and he's on a film set for a western. Cooper isn't so sure on the direction of the film, especially when he's supposed to kill one of the criminals. When the scene cuts, Cooper speaks to the director, who points out that the scriptwriter was let go for his communist views. Instead, they're now going to go for a New America style. We then cut back to the present, or well, the future. time is a little bit confusing here.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff.
The ghoul catches up with Wilzig, accompanied by CX-404, where he finds the severed remains of his target. He now needs to find Lucy, and he suspects that she may be off in the direction of the city. Of course, Lucy's footsteps can be seen on the ground, so that's probably a dead giveaway over her direction too. As for Lucy, she continues to march across the wilderness, closer towards the irradiated city in the distance. She continues to ignore Wilzig's advice to lighting up fires late at night. She observes his head and notices something in the side of his neck. She doesn't pry further though, despite her curiosity. Meanwhile, Maximus finds himself having to adopt Titus's voice as he sets out to dispel the concerns of his superior, who chatters over the radio. When he mentions that his squire, that being Maximus, has died, he sent a replacement. Maximus hurriedly destroys the radio and then pays to get extra parts, which cost him more than bottle caps, given he also loses some teeth too. When he returns to the armour, Maximus finds himself surrounded by raiders. They beat him down and leave him a mess on the floor. Unfortunately, they also manage to get into the armour, but before they can take control of it, Maximus returns and manages to crush the skull for one of their comrades using the Brotherhood armour. It does the trick, but unfortunately, reinforcements fly in.
Oh dear, we are in trouble.
Maximus has no choice but to don the armour and pretend to be Titus. Thaddeus is a new squire, one of the guys who used to bully Maximus, and he also brings a message from the Elder Cleric. Apparently, this target is a #1 priority because whoever controls it will also control the wasteland. Lucy makes it down to the coastline, where she finds herself confronted by a mutant, which drags her away. She manages to hold her own though until the ghoul shows and holds her at gunpoint. Unfortunately, in the scuffle, Wilzig's head is stolen by this mutant. The ghoul knows that this creature is a gulper and it's bad news. Down in the vault, Chet is being reassigned and no longer the gatekeeper. As for Norman, he's not reassigned per se, but given rather demeaning tasks to take part in within the vault, including bringing food to the locked up raiders in the jail cells down below. Speaking of demeaning tasks, Maximus makes the most of having Thaddeus with him, forcing the guy to do his bidding, climbing a tree to get an apple and eventually coming across the body of Wilzig. They're very much on the trail now, and not far behind the ghoul and Lucy. With this in mind, the ghoul decides to use Lucy as bait to lure the mutant in so he can get their head back. It seems to do the trick, and we get a look at this mutant firsthand. It's a massive, nasty creature, but after Lucy dispatches it, the ghoul decides to string her along and take her with him. There's a line here that is so good, and it basically sums up the Fallout games to a T. As they leave together, the ghoul retorts, and I quote, "Thou shalt get sidetracked by bullshit every goddamn time." As I and many other Fallout players will attest to, this is very true. How many times have you played going off on a mission and you end up sidetracked checking out some question marks, only to realise 3 hours have passed and you're no closer to your target? Anyway, I digress. As this is ongoing, Thaddeus reveals more about his past. Apparently, Thaddeus himself used to be the regular punching bag with the Brotherhood, but when Maximus flew in as a new recruit, he worked to move everyone's attention across to him.
Unbelievable.
He feels bad for it, unaware that Maximus is inside the suit, and eventually they move on to the area of the Gulper. In fact, they head right out into the water, where it seems to have revived again and ready to charge in for the kill. As the Gulper rushes at Maximus, he and Thaddeus work together to dispatch the creature. In doing so, it also spits up a whole range of trinkets. CX-404 is here as well, and he begins sniffing around the head. Meanwhile, Lucy finds herself at the mercy of the ghoul, who refuses to let her have any water and marches her out into the irradiated remains of a town. As they continue forward, Cooper shoots out the face from a Vault-Tec banner. This is personal to him, as we see that he actually used to be the face of Vault-Tec too.
Are you sure about that?
Well, there it is.
And that is where episode 3 comes to an end. Episode 4 of Fallout picks up with Lucy and the ghoul wandering through the wasteland. They arrive at Westside Medical Clinic, where they find a fellow ghoul called Roger. There are empty vials all over the floor, and he bemoans Smoothskins for their, well, smooth skin. Unfortunately, Roger is turning, so Cooper puts him out of his misery and shoots a guy in the head. Before they go, the ghoul eats parts of Roger. Lucy isn't particularly happy about this barbarism, but her luck turns sour when the ghoul decides she should help make ass jerky and slice the guy up.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen, mate.
She's starting to understand the wasteland now, and despite her insistence before, is forced to drink the dirty puddle water outside to quench her thirst. Over at the vault, voting is about to take place between Reg, Betty and Woody for becoming the new overseer. They still haven't got any information from the raiders, they're keeping in containment though. With the guys pretending like everything is hunky-dory, the odd one out here is Norman. He misses his father and sister, but as the last standing McLean, his voice carries weight, at least according to Betty anyway. Norman is ashamed of himself for hiding while all the fighting was going on, but he gets some sound advice to tread lightly. What he does learn, however, is that something was going on at Vault 32, and it's far from innocent.
What's in that book?
Spoilers.
In fact, he's denied from accessing the records, which only backs up his concerns after speaking to one of the prisoners. He teams up with Chet and they head inside again to see if they can make sense of Vault 32. This time though, they have a proper look. The last biosignal detected on one of the Pit Boys was actually from 2 years ago. It would appear that the Vault Dwellers were long dead before the raiders showed up, meaning there's something far more nefarious going on here. Given how some of the corpses are laid out, it would seem that they killed each other. Scrawled in blood on one of the walls are the words, "We know the truth." Checking the Overseer's log, Norman realises that the raiders got in by using Rose McClane's ID. Alas, the plot thickens. Lucy and the Ghoul head over to the Super Duper Mart, where the gunslinger intends to sell Lucy in exchange for vials. These keep him from turning into a fully fledged zombie and keep parts of his sanity. As Lucy heads on in alone, the Ghoul passes out on the floor. Inside the Mart, a shell-shocked Lucy is taken over to the medical clinic, where she's given a new finger by a friendly robot called Snip Snip, and is then tranquilised. You see, this robot was also going to harvest her organs too, hence the name.
Oh, hell no.
Lucy thinks quickly though, and she manages to subdue the robot. She holds up the bandits at gunpoint, or well, a Broxo cleaning fluid point with Snip Snip,
No, it's not funny. It's not funny.
and has them free the ghouls trapped in the cages. However, some of them have turned, and Lucy is forced to kill one of the zombified women. She's the lone survivor in all of this, but Lucy does drop some vials for the ghoul outside, retorting that she'll never be like him. When Lucy walks away, the ghoul heads inside and finds the mother load of vials, which he takes for himself. Funnily enough, one of the videos there happens to be of Cooper back in his movie days, and he settles down to watch it as episode 4 comes to an end. Episode 5 of Fallout picks up with Maximus and Thaddeus together in an abandoned train station. Whilst there, and after branding Thaddeus with the T on the back of his neck, Maximus reveals himself behind the armour. Thaddeus immediately turns on his former comrade, believing the Brotherhood will kill him for this. Maximus knows he can't trust Thaddeus, so he decides to kill him. However, Thaddeus subdues the armour by taking the fusion core, leaving Maximus stranded alone and stuck inside the armour.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
With Maximus unable to move, Thaddeus leaves with CX-404 and Wilsig's head. Thankfully, Maximus is saved by Lucy, who shows up and kills the rad roaches that try to get in the armour. She eventually opens the faceplate, but Lucy is in a rough way. She's got radiation sickness and needs the vials to help her. Max introduces himself to her as Knight Titus, rather than Maximus, but he's true to his word, which is just as well because Lucy passes out right after. When she regains consciousness, they agree to work together. As they walk, Lucy runs down just how naive she's been with the other Vault Dwellers and how it is very different to life on the surface. As they walk, they pass a couple of travellers and, despite playing it cool, quickly realise that they're actually fiends. Fiends are Fallout's version of cannibals here, and Maximus manages to think fast and kill them both. He does get shot, but only on his arm, thankfully. Maximus and Lucy arrive at Shady Sands, and the latter is shocked to find out the population of this place was over 34,000 at one point. After all, Reclamation Day is what the Vault Dwellers were raised to believe in and strive towards. Only, it's already happened, and there are far more people on the surface than she expected. Her whole existence has been a lie. Maximus does temper her expectations though, showing that the entire city has been blown off the map following a massive explosion. Now, this is a nice way of referencing Fallout 3 and the nuke you're allowed to detonate or leave as is. And even if it's just a coincidence, it's still a neat inclusion all the same. Lucy realises that Maximus is bleeding quite badly, and his graze is anything but.
'Tis but a scratch.
The pair walk together and make it to the Hawthorne Medical Laboratories. Lucy is determined to find a first aid kit, but of course anything could be inside. Lucy rushes on ahead all the same, while Maximus follows soon after. Unfortunately, they both end up captured and end up in an unlikely place, a vault. Meanwhile, Norman and Chet continue to search through Vault 32 for answers. They believe that Lucy's Pip-Boy was stolen by the raiders. However, it does look like the Vault Dwellers here were trying to get to Vault 31. But why? Well, that's a mystery for another day, as they decide to head back home. As they do, it's voting day for the Overseer election in Vault 33. Betty wins by a landslide.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
But it would appear that there's more of a mystery going on here. Norman notices that each of the Overseers elected in the history have all come from Vault 31. They did the exact same thing for Vault 32 as well. Norman believes that there's something far more sinister going on here, and he's determined to figure out just what that is. An emergency meeting at Vault 33 takes place, with Betty deciding that they need to resettle Vault 32 and start building up the resources again and move in to start anew. Alone, Norman speaks to Betty, who explains that Lucy was buried with her Pip-Boy by her and Hank. However, we know, and so does Norman, that that's not true, and it reinforces that all is not right in this vault. And that is where episode 5 comes to an end. Episode 6 of Fallout begins with Cooper Howard's advert for the vaults being played on a black and white background. Specifically, we're focusing on Vault 4 here. This place is entirely occupied by scientists and there'll be 80 in total, conducting a 5-year trial. This is a hint at where Maximus and Lucy are being kept, but for now, we follow Cooper as he's living the high life and enjoying his role as the face of Vault-Tec. Remember the voice of Snip Snip? Well, this belongs to none other than a guy called Bartholomew Codsworth. He's an old friend of Cooper and he sold his voice rights to make this happen. He points out that he ended the world as a product unto itself and they need to be ready to sell that. The war is coming though, and Cooper is disillusioned to what's happening. He does see everyone around him start to believe in the vault and doing what they can to protect themselves. This includes Barb, his wife, who does what she can to get their family a place in one of the vaults. You see, Cooper went to war to defend freedom and believes the vaults, with their conformity, blue jumpsuits and rules that include things like no dogs, are infringing upon that. Back in the future though, the Ghoul finds himself caught at the hands of government agents, who show up and take him to their boss. The bounty hunters bring the Ghoul over to a guy called Sorrel. He's heard of the Ghoul, of course, and as they sit together inside this bar, the Ghoul is able to sew his finger back on again. They sit together and the Ghoul brings up Moldava, who is apparently super dangerous. Sorrel is a self-proclaimed president here, and he makes a mistake of trusting the Ghoul and telling his subordinates to put their guns away. Quick as a flash, the Ghoul stands and kills them both. Now, up on the wall of the bar happens to be a wanted poster for none other than Moldava. It turns out Cooper actually recognises her, which stems from flashbacks where he introduced herself as his biggest fan. Meanwhile, Lucy and Maximus are kept in the vault and patched up. Apparently it will only be a few hours, just so they know they don't have radiation. Lucy is naive about this and decides to hunker down, but nonchalantly asks Maximus if he wants to have sex. He declines and that's the end of that. However, as the camera pans out, we see that they're inside a room called Test Subjects. Lucy and Maximus then meet the Overseer, who clearly has his eye on them. However, it soon becomes clear that a good chunk of the residents inside this vault also appear to be some sort of hybrid humans. Lucy is pretty surprised by the vault and she speaks plainly to the Overseer in his office. He mentions how they call the surface dwellers surfies and doesn't like conforming to their ideas. When Lucy brings up level 12, which the Overseer earlier mentioned was off limits, he immediately tells her to leave after spitting his drink out. Maximus is also curious over what this vault may be holding and he discovers plenty of fusion cores power in the place. He's soon encouraged to head over to Unit 428 for a hot shower and to revel in what the vault has to offer, and he gladly obliges. There's a hamper there with plenty of standard Fallout gear and items like sugar bombs that fans of the franchise will recognise. Meanwhile, Lucy stumbles upon a classroom and finds a model for Shady Sands. She actually finds a timeline written up on the chalkboard too and realises that the vault has been taken over by the NCR, the New Californian Republic. The music crescendos here with the familiar motif from the Fallout theme, and it's a really nice moment overall. Of course, we're not about to play their music here because we'll end up getting copyright struck. Anyway, I digress. Lucy and the other vault dwellers are called over for a meeting, given there's a surface dweller tradition. This tradition includes everyone stripping down and worshipping the Flame Mother, including ritualistic chanting and covering themselves in the ashes of those taken from them. They also drink blood too.
What the hell is even that?
Getting nowhere with Maximus, Lucy heads up to floor 12 to prove that there's something amiss. Lucy is determined to smash his idealistic perception of this vault, which is very clearly not the utopia he expected. Unfortunately, when one of the scientists shows up, Lucy is outed and she struggles to fight her way out. Birdie, the leader here, manages to subdue Lucy, while Maximus is none the wiser in his room. And that is where episode 6 comes to an end. Episode 7 of Fallout starts with two wanderers using metal detectors to find gear in the sand. These are lead farmers, and unfortunately when they return home they find the Ghoul eating in the kitchen. The father of this house is not happy, but he does agree to answer Cooper's questions. It turns out Tommy, the farmer's son, is mixed up with Moldava and her crew. He strongly believes in her mantra of fixing up the world. Unfortunately, he's also enticed his older brother Rufus into this too. He's dead now, thanks to the Ghoul. Tommy reluctantly reveals that Moldava is up at the observatory, but given his strong beliefs and itchy trigger finger, gets a bullet to the stomach for his troubles. Back in the past, Cooper ends up clashing with Moldava, who brings up that she actually knows Barb. This gets his attention and they walk together. As they do, Barb explains that America has been locked in a resource war for over a decade. Vault-Tec bought the means to end that war and she wants his help in getting back at Vault-Tec, and, by extension, Cooper's wife. She also explains how those who aren't communists are insane.
Really?
Now, Cooper does actually bug the Pip-Boy when he heads home, and decides to figure out exactly what his wife may be hiding. Moldava's words certainly resonate with him and he keeps a close eye on Barb from here on out. Meanwhile, Lucy is handcuffed inside Vault 4. They show her the tape of the scientists, including Overseer Hawthorne, who are all under attack by one of the Gulpers. which ends up getting loose. Now, it would appear that what they're doing is hybridizing humans with radioactive resistant species to try and make them capable of withstanding high radiation. However, these experiments went horribly wrong when the creatures ended up killing the scientists. It turns out the vault is actually taken over by the creatures, and they ask about the experiments taking place in Vault 33. When Lucy says there isn't one, it's enough for her to be arrested. As she's taken away, they pass Maximus's room, and he stops munching popcorn and gets to work freeing her. Lucy isn't hard to find though, given she's brought before the entire vault and sacrificed for causing harm. As she's sentenced to death, she's banished to the surface, and the sword presumably used to decapitate her by the Overseer is actually used to cut her binds rather than slicing her head off. They even hand over 2 weeks of supplies too.
A surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one.
While Lucy asks for Maximus to stay in the vault, Maximus is unaware of this, and instead he shuts down the fusion cores, using one for the armor, and bursts in with his Brotherhood armor and begins smashing up the place. Lucy does stop him midway, and he awkwardly apologizes, eventually leaving after stealing the core. Lucy is not happy with this and eventually convinces him to give the core back. Maximus feels naked without the armor, but he reluctantly agrees. Lucy gives him a pep talk and they decide to head out and find Wilsig's head. Elsewhere, Thaddeus finds a nearby petrol station where he decides to leave CX-404 inside a Nuka-Cola canister. With the dog left behind, Thaddeus listens to the radio, another lovely nod to the games, and ends up at a pharmacy where a doctor agrees to fix him up in exchange for a fusion core, of course. The doctor grins maniacally, and those who have been watching closely may recognise him from earlier in the show when he passed Lucy in Philly. Thaddeus gets his foot healed back up again, reversing the mangled damage. He also gives him the direction towards Shady Sands. As the doctor scampers off, the Ghoul manages to find CX-404 and uses him to track down Thaddeus. He does call the mutt dog meat, a nod to Fallout 4, and off they go. Thaddeus manages to use a radio, but while waiting for his ride, ends up impaled through the neck, just as Lucy and Maximus show up. Now, remember the concoction from the doctor? Well, it turns out it's turned him into a ghoul, so while he can recover from seemingly life-threatening wounds, he'll now need the vials to top up too.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
Maximus agrees to give him some time to leave, and he also ends up kissing Lucy as the pair part ways. Maximus intends to slow the Brotherhood down, and Lucy rushes off as she says she'll be over in Vault 33. Speaking of which, over in Vault 33, things take an unexpected turn. The raiders have all been killed with rat poison, and unfortunately the orderly is arrested for this. Of course, we know this is Betty's doing, and right afterwards the assignments are dished out for repopulation and changing the vaults. Chet and Sandra are heading to Vault 32, while Norman is staying in 33. After the new dwellers are shown, see, forced, into their new vault, Norman breaks into the Overseer's office and decides to figure out what's happening. He uses a computer, with the clever hacking minigame from the Games for Good Measure, and sends a message to the Overseer of Vault 31. He gets a reply back instantly, and manages to head over there, after saying the mission has been compromised. As he stands in front of the vault door, 31 opens, and Norman steps inside. As Norman heads deeper inside the vault, he's shocked by what he sees. And what is it? Well, we'll have to wait for the finale. Episode 8 of Fallout starts its finale with us in the wasteland. The Brotherhood of Steel have picked up Maximus and he's en route back to the base. He's prepared to do what he can to return to Lucy, who obviously urged him to find her in Vault 33 at the end of the previous episode. After all his experiences, Maximus returns a very different man. He marches up to the Elder and presents the head to him. Dane is there too, and unfortunately, Maximus is quickly found out to be a fake for bringing the wrong head to their leader. Dane eventually pledges her loyalty to Maximus, begging for him not to be killed. The Elder is surprised, given this show of loyalty, and Maximus then reveals the truth. He points out that Titus died as a coward running away. Maximus promises to lead them to the relic, and the Elder decides that Maximus will be his sword, and together they're going to establish control of the wasteland.
Yeah, that's not gonna happen, mate.
Given his whole life he's been looking for a home, this is a very enticing proposition for Maximus, except for one thing. His heart has wandered and seems to belong to Lucy now. Speaking of which, Lucy shows up at Moldaver's base and is led right to her father. He's still alive and being kept in a cage. She offers her some food and encourages her to sit down and join them. Lucy hands over the severed head, and while Moldaver drills into the side, she asks for her father back. Moldaver agrees, but beforehand promises to reveal exactly how she knows his father. While Hank begs Lucy not to listen, Moldaver explains that he wasn't born in the vault. This coincides with what Norman has found in Vault 31, which happens to be a brain in a glass jar. It recognises that Norman has 50% of Hank's DNA, but isn't Betty either. Beyond this, Norman clicks a button and is shocked when he finds something called Bud's Buds. In the past, we see the inception of this, as Cooper keeps track of Barb and follows her to Vault Tech HQ. There, he learns that the corporation is conspiring against the world, deciding that they can outlive everyone else by orchestrating the apocalypse, and that way, they won't need to fight. The group disagree over the best way forward here, but Barb is among them. With Hank listening in, he believes that Barb is going to do the right thing, until she brings up the interconnected 3-vault idea, vaults 31 to 33. Barb eventually decides that with 100 vaults across America, they can use each of them as a scientific experiment and see who has the best idea for humanity's salvation. When it comes to our 3 vaults, Vault 31 is full of these executives in cryogenic freezing, while vaults 32 and 33 are what the brain calls the breeding pool, full of selective companions. Apparently it's the ultimate expression of HR, R&D. They are genetically selected to breed with the buds in order to create a class of supermanagers, people who will inherit the Earth after wiping the surface clean. These experiments all coincide with one big, shocking revelation that we may have figured out by now. The bombs were dropped intentionally by the government to create a true monopoly. Now, Hank, Lucy's father, was actually Barb's new assistant we've heard so much about, and as he talks to him, Barb's words ring true for all Fallout fans. War. War never changes.
He said it! He said it!
Back in the present, we get more answers. It turns out Dane was the one who hurt themselves intentionally with the razor blade because they were afraid to go out into the wilderness. As for Moldava, why did she take Hank in the first place? Well, it all stems from Lucy's mother. Rose was clever and figured out that something was siphoning the water away from the vaults. She believed that perhaps civilization had returned to the surface, and thus she left to prove her theory correct. Hank believed it was a ridiculous idea, so she ran away when she realised he was hiding things. Remember the story Lucy told about the sun and feeling its heat earlier in the season? Well, it turns out that was actually real. Lucy and Norman grew up with their mother outside the vaults when they were really little, but Hank came after Lucy and burned the city to the ground, taking the kids and bringing them into the vaults. This all stems back to Vault-Tec and how they deal with competition. They just destroy anyone who stand in their way. Both Hank and Moldava compete over Lucy's swaying moral compass, but the kicker is what happened to Rose. It turned out she wasn't buried, she was actually turned into a ghoul, and she's sitting right there at the table. So Betty and Hank's story about her being buried was a fabrication. This cold fusion inside Wilzig's neck happens to be the key to unlocking civilization and starting anew. Lucy forces her father to give up the code, and in doing so, starts a chain reaction that powers on the computers. As the cold fusion hits 100% and powers up fully, she looks set to hit the button until the alarms wail and the Brotherhood is incoming. As fighting breaks out between the two factions, the Brotherhood and the NCR, Lucy realises that yes, war never changes. As the Brotherhood heads into the HQ, they find none other than the Ghoul waiting for them. He knows that the armour has a weakness in the chest plate and kills one of the soldiers with ease. With the lights shut off, the Ghoul makes short work of them all. The fighting spills over to the rooftop, where Maximus shows and speaks to Lucy. Maximus frees Hank from the cage, but his demeanour changes when he learns that it was Hank responsible for what happened at Shady Sands. In fact, while they talk, Hank dons the Brotherhood armour, knocks Max out, and demands Lucy come with him. Instead, she grabs a gun, and then the Ghoul shows up. Cooper comes face to face with Hank and demands to know where his family are. Instead, Hank flies off the roof and scarpers. Unfortunately, he doesn't get any answers, and we're left with more of a mystery to contend with. In fact, he's decided that he and Lucy should team up together and go find Hank and whatever else he may be hiding, including meeting their makers. Lucy grabs the gun, kills her mother to put Rose out of her misery, and joins the gunslinger. She kisses an unconscious Max goodbye, retorts okie dokie, and off she goes. We then cut back to Norman, who finds himself trapped in Vault 31. The only solution, seemingly, is for him to be put to sleep inside one of the pods. We don't see much more of him though, given we actually focus on Max waking up in the aftermath of the fighting. Now, Moldava is still alive, and she moans the word Rose before pressing the button on the computer and activating the cold fusion. This turns on all the power for the nearby city. However, Moldava's part in this is over, as she bleeds out on the ground. With her gone, Dane shows and believes Max has killed Moldava, and he's hailed a hero with the Brotherhood. His allegiance though is starting to shift here, and he doesn't take kindly to the applause. He worries what the Brotherhood will do with infinite power. Lucy and the gunslinger arrive at the wasteland that is Hollywood. While they continue forward, we cut to Hank, who manages to make it to a very familiar settlement the fans of the games will absolutely love. It's New Vegas.
Oh my god! Okay, it's happening! Stay calm! Calm down!
And that is where season 1 of Fallout comes to an end. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.